At 5:47 a.m., my HOA president dumped industrial poison into my lake, not knowing it fed the entire neighborhood's drinking water. I was standing on my dock, coffee in hand, when I heard designer heels clicking on gravel. Victoria Hammond, Gucci sunglasses perched on her head, clipboard under one arm, dragging a massive bag of copper sulfate with the other. The moment she tipped that bag and poured it into the crystal-clear water, the air turned sharp and metallic. Within 3 hours, the first base floated to the surface, belly up, silver and lifeless. I was holding one in my trembling hands when she looked directly at me, smiled like she'd just won the lottery, and said, "It's just algae treatment, Dale. This is a decorative water feature now, not your personal fishing hole." Then she climbed into her white BMW and drove away without a second glance. What Victoria never bothered to check, what she never even thought to investigate, was where those underground limestone springs from my lake actually led. And by the time I finished documenting everything with photographs, water samples, and chemical analysis, the entire HOA was already drinking it. Every single family. Stay with me, because the next call I made turned this neighborhood drama into a federal criminal case. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. And hit that subscribe button if you love watching entitled HOA Presidents Get Exactly What's Coming to Them. Let me back up and tell you how we got here. My name is Dale Hutchinson. I'm 61 years old, and I spent 32 years keeping America's drinking water safe as a municipal water treatment supervisor. When I retired in 2018, my wife Margaret and I moved to this beautiful slice of paradise called Riverside Meadows subdivision, built back in 1985 around the most stunning spring-fed lake you've ever laid eyes on. We paid top dollar for the lot with direct water frontage, specifically because I owned the exclusive fishing rights. Every single morning for 18 years, Margaret and I would cast our lines at sunrise. It wasn't just about catching fish, it was our sanctuary, our meditation, our sacred ritual together. I've got weathered photographs of Margaret holding trophy base, both of us grinning like kids on Christmas morning. When breast cancer took her 4 years ago, that lake became my only remaining connection to her memory, the only place I could still feel her presence. Here's what most of the newer residents don't understand about Riverside Meadows, what they never bothered to learn before signing their mortgage papers. We're not connected to city water. Those 53 houses spread across this subdivision get their drinking water from private wells that tap directly into the same underground limestone aquifer that feeds our lake. The original residents knew this critical fact, understood the delicate ecosystem, but newcomers just turn on their kitchen taps and assume it's treated municipal water coming through. Big mistake. Massive mistake. Enter Victoria Hammond, stage left with all the grace and subtlety of a bulldozer. She moved here from Chicago 20 months ago, purchased the biggest mansion on the block for cash, and immediately launched her campaign for HOA president. Victoria's a luxury real estate developer with perfectly manicured acrylic nails and an Instagram addiction that borders on clinical. Everything she sees gets filtered through one single lens. Does this increase property values? To Victoria, fishing is trailer park behavior, something poor people do. The lake isn't a living, breathing ecosystem that's been thriving for 200 years. It's decorative landscaping, nothing more than an oversized bird bath that needs proper management. She genuinely believed with absolute conviction that she could upgrade the neighborhood's aesthetic appeal by eliminating what she called redneck recreational activities. The morning she poisoned my lake, I was dealing with my own serious health challenges. Type 2 diabetes had been absolutely destroying me lately. My blood sugar would spike dangerously high whenever stress hit my system. Fishing was literally doctor's orders, prescribed by my endocrinologist as stress management therapy. But Victoria didn't care about doctor's orders or medical necessity. 5:30 a.m., April 22nd. I'm tying a new lure onto my line when I hear her heels clicking on the asphalt path. Victoria's dragging this industrial-sized 50-pound bag of algaecide, and she's dumping it straight into the water without hesitation, without testing, without any professional consultation whatsoever. This decorative water feature doesn't need rednecks making it ugly with their fishing garbage, she announces like she's reading from a prepared corporate statement. The smell hit me first, that harsh chemical burn of copper sulfate mixing with pure spring water. Then came the color change that made my stomach drop. Crystal clear water turning toxic green within minutes, spreading like poison through the entire lake. By noon, dead fish were floating belly up everywhere you looked. Bass, bluegill, catfish, even the ancient snapping turtle we'd named Winston, who'd been living there for decades. The water reeked of chemical death, a smell that brought back my worst memories from treatment plant disasters. I confronted her immediately, my voice shaking with rage and disbelief. "Victoria, what the hell did you just dump into my lake?" She snapped back without even looking up from her phone. "Pond maintenance, Dale. Calm yourself down. It's just standard algae control treatment." But there was no algae problem. The lake had been absolutely pristine, healthy, thriving. This was pure spite wrapped in fake environmental concern, nothing more. When I tried to explain that she'd just committed a serious environmental crime, that she could face federal charges, Victoria actually laughed. She threw her head back and laughed like I'd told the funniest joke she'd ever heard. "It's a decorative pond, Dale. HOA managed property. Maybe if you spent less time playing with fish and more time reading the subdivision bylaws, you'd understand how community standards actually work around here." That's when I knew with absolute certainty that this wasn't simple ignorance or a misunderstanding. This was war. Victoria had deliberately declared war on my lake, on my memories of Margaret, on my legal property rights. She just didn't realize yet that she'd picked a fight with someone who understood water systems better than she understood real estate development. Someone who'd spent 3 decades dealing with water contamination and knew exactly how to document environmental crimes. The dead fish kept floating to the surface for 5 straight days. Every single one felt like Victoria had personally slapped Margaret's memory across the face. But here's what Victoria didn't know, what would eventually lead to her complete destruction. I document absolutely everything. 32 years in water treatment operations teaches you that documentation is your most powerful weapon. Photographs with timestamps, water samples stored properly, chemical residue tests conducted by certified laboratories. I was building an airtight federal case while she was posting Instagram stories about neighborhood improvements and increased property values. But here's what Victoria really didn't know. What would ultimately destroy her entire life. Her decorative pond actually fed the drinking water for every single house in our subdivision, including her own $1 million mansion. 2 days after the poisoning incident, Victoria dramatically escalated the situation. Professional-grade metal signs appeared around the entire lake perimeter overnight, not cheap plastic hardware store signs. These were expensive powder-coated metal, properly mounted on steel posts, looking completely official. "No fishing, decorative water feature only. Violators will be prosecuted." Then came the certified letter, delivered by a process server to my front door. Notice of trespassing violation and cease and desist order. The letter was 4 pages of legal-sounding nonsense written by some cheap online legal service. Victoria accused me of unauthorized recreational activities on HOA-managed property and threatened criminal trespassing charges if I continued fishing. She even claimed I was creating environmental hazards and sanitation concerns that threatened community health. My blood sugar spiked so dangerously high that afternoon, I had to immediately increase my insulin dosage. Stress and diabetes are a lethal combination, and Victoria knew exactly which emotional buttons to push for maximum damage. But here's where Victoria made her first massive tactical error, the kind of mistake that would eventually cost her everything. Those signs weren't just posted on HOA common area property. She had them planted directly on my private land, marking territory she absolutely didn't own. She was like a dog peeing on someone else's fence, claiming ownership through sheer audacity. Time for some good old-fashioned document research. I drove straight to the county courthouse and pulled every single paper related to Riverside Meadows subdivision, going back to its original construction. Original subdivision plat from 1985, my personal property deed, professional survey maps, environmental impact studies, water rights documentation, the complete works. Cost me $68 in copying fees, but it was worth every single penny. The smoking gun was buried deep in the subdivision's original restrictive covenants, written in legal language that most people never bothered to read. Lake rights and water access shall remain permanently with Lot 47 in perpetuity, including all fishing, boating, and recreational privileges without restriction or limitation. That's lawyer speak for, this lake belongs to Dale forever, and no future HOA president can ever change that. Period. I also discovered something absolutely fascinating that would become critically important later. The HOA bylaws, every single version from 1985 to present day, never once mentioned lake management or water treatment authority. Victoria had been operating on pure assumption and intimidation tactics. She'd convinced herself that being HOA president meant controlling everything within subdivision boundaries, like some kind of neighborhood dictator. Completely wrong. Dead wrong. Here's a knowledge nugget I learned from 32 years dealing with property disputes and water rights conflicts. Always request a certified boundary survey before engaging in any water rights conflict. Most people make dangerous assumptions about property lines based on what they visually see, but legal descriptions and recorded plats trump visual boundaries every single time, without exception. Translation for normal people: never trust someone else's interpretation of what they claim to own. Verify everything yourself through official county records. So I played it polite but absolutely firm in my response. I personally removed every illegal sign she'd posted. Then I posted laminated copies of my property deed on each signpost location, making sure everyone could see the legal documentation. Finally, I sent Victoria her own certified letter, including a professional surveyor's map, highlighting her trespassing violations in bright red. The letter was polite but crystal clear. Remove your signs from my property within 72 hours or face your own trespassing charges. The mini twist came when I contacted the original subdivision developer, a man named Harold Peterson, now 79 years old and living in retirement in Sarasota, Florida. Harold confirmed everything I'd discovered and added crucial information. Lake ownership was specifically preserved with Lot 47 because the entire community depended on its underground springs for well water. Harold explained over the phone, his voice still sharp despite his age. That lake isn't decorative landscaping, Dale. It's the beating heart of your water system. Anyone who contaminates it is literally poisoning everybody's drinking water. Those words hit me like a freight train. Victoria wasn't just killing fish out of spite. She was contaminating the source water for 53 families, including her own. Victoria's response to my certified letter was predictably dramatic and over the top. She called an emergency HOA meeting to discuss what she termed my aggressive territorial behavior and threats against community leadership. But when I showed up to that packed meeting with my documentation, with my property deeds and survey maps and original covenants, the entire room dynamics shifted fast and dramatically. Turns out when you have indisputable legal facts on your side, bullies lose their audience immediately. This isn't about fishing rights or personal recreation, I explained calmly to the packed room of concerned neighbors. This is fundamentally about property rights and environmental protection. Victoria doesn't have any legal authority whatsoever over my lake, and she's already caused severe ecological damage with completely unsupervised chemical treatments that violated federal environmental law. The kicker, the moment that changed everything, was watching Victoria's hand-picked committee members realize they'd been fed complete misinformation. 3 newcomers who'd enthusiastically supported her lake control plan suddenly looked uncomfortable and confused. Longtime residents started speaking up, sharing their own memories of fishing with previous property owners, explaining the critical water system connections that Victoria either didn't understand or chose to ignore. But Victoria doubled down instead of backing off gracefully. "We need professional management of this water feature," she declared, somehow managing to mispronounce aquatic as aquatic, while desperately trying to sound scientific and authoritative. That's when she announced her next aggressive move, hiring what she called a professional aquatic consultant to evaluate lake health hazards and provide expert recommendations. I could literally see the gears turning in her head. If she couldn't legally claim ownership, she'd manufacture fake safety concerns instead. Victoria's so-called professional aquatic consultant turned out to be a 24-year-old kid named Kyle who cleaned swimming pools for a living and had absolutely zero credentials in natural water systems. I discovered this embarrassing fact when I followed his company pickup truck to 4 different houses where he was vacuuming leaves out of residential backyard pools. His professional aquatic consultation consisted of a plastic clipboard, a basic pH test strip you can buy at any pet store, and a laminated certificate from the Pool and Spa Association of Georgia that qualified him to maintain chlorinated swimming pools. That's it. Kyle's comprehensive environmental assessment of my lake took exactly 11 minutes from start to finish. He dipped his test strip into the water, took 3 cell phone photos with terrible lighting, and declared my lake a severe bacterial contamination hazard requiring immediate intensive chemical treatment protocols. His official report was 4 pages of laser-printed nonsense filled with scientific-sounding terminology he clearly didn't understand, with recommendations that would have killed every remaining living organism in the water within hours. But Kyle's fraudulent credentials weren't even my biggest problem at this point. Victoria was systematically using his fake professional report to convince concerned neighbors that my fishing equipment was spreading dangerous bacteria throughout the community. Anonymous complaints started mysteriously appearing with the county health department. Paranoid parents forbade their children from playing anywhere near the lakeshore. Victoria threatened repeatedly to involve state environmental authorities if I continued my unsanitary fishing practices. The whispered conversations at the neighborhood mailbox cluster stopped completely whenever I approached. Nobody would make direct eye contact with me anymore. I was being treated like a public health menace, like some kind of biological terrorist in my own neighborhood, all based on the pool maintenance opinion of someone who couldn't even spell ecosystem correctly on his fraudulent report. Time to fight fire with actual legitimate fire. I contacted the real county health department and ordered comprehensive professional water quality testing from a state-certified environmental laboratory. The testing cost me $640 out of pocket, but I desperately needed legitimate science to counter Victoria's fake expertise and manufactured panic. While waiting for the laboratory results to come back, I did extensive research on Kyle's supposed company. Aquatic Solutions Professional was registered as a basic pool cleaning service in Clayton County. Kyle's only certification was for maintaining chlorinated residential swimming pools. He had absolutely zero training in natural water systems, aquatic biology, ecological assessment, or environmental science. Nothing. The real county health inspector, a woman named Maria Gonzalez, who'd been testing water quality for 17 years, agreed to personally visit after I explained the concerning situation. Maria could smell Victoria's chemical contamination from 50 feet away before she even reached the lake shore. "Someone's been dumping massive amounts of copper sulfate," she said immediately, her nose wrinkling in disgust. Way too much copper sulfate for a natural water system this size." Maria's preliminary field tests confirmed exactly what I'd suspected with growing horror. Copper levels were 43 times higher than federal safe drinking water standards. The beneficial natural bacteria that normally filtered harmful microorganisms had been completely eliminated by Victoria's chemical assault. Sandra's algae control treatments had systematically destroyed our ecosystem's natural biological water treatment system. Here's a critical knowledge nugget about natural water systems that most people never learn. Beneficial bacteria colonies in natural spring-fed lakes work exactly like biological filters, removing harmful contaminants and pathogens before water reaches underground springs and aquifers. Kill those beneficial bacteria, and you've eliminated nature's completely free water treatment plant that's been working perfectly for thousands of years. Translation for regular people: Victoria broke our ecosystem's natural cleaning system and transformed clean water pipelines into poison delivery channels. The mini-twist, the revelation that made my blood run cold, came when Maria explained the broader geological implications while studying survey maps. "This lake doesn't just affect your fishing, Dale," she said, pointing to underground geological survey maps with obvious concern. "These limestone springs connect directly to your entire subdivision's well water through natural underground channels. Everyone who lives here, every single family, has been drinking chemically contaminated water for months without knowing it." That realization hit me like a physical punch to the stomach. Victoria hadn't just poisoned my personal fishing spot out of spite. She'd systematically poisoned the entire community's drinking water supply. Every kitchen tap, every shower, every cup of coffee, every glass of water given to children. 212 people had been consuming dangerous copper-contaminated water because Victoria thought she was simply cleaning a decorative pond to improve property values. The official county health department report was absolutely devastating to read. Massive ecological damage, multiple federal Clean Water Act violations, and immediate serious health risk for anyone consuming well water anywhere in the subdivision. Kyle's fraudulent recommendations would have made everything exponentially worse by adding even more toxic chemicals to an already severely contaminated system. I presented Maria's official findings at the next mandatory HOA meeting, along with detailed documentation thoroughly exposing Kyle's fake credentials and fraudulent expertise. Kyle's only expertise is swimming pool maintenance, I explained to the stunned, silent crowd. His chemical recommendations would have turned our natural spring water into industrial, toxic waste within days. Victoria's response was entirely predictable at this point. She immediately claimed my laboratory tests were obviously biased because I'd personally hired the testing laboratory myself. She actually accused me, in front of the entire community, of somehow manipulating certified scientific results to make her look bad, as if I could possibly bribe state-certified chemists to fabricate water contamination data. Absolutely ridiculous. But the damage to Victoria's credibility was already done and irreversible. Parents started frantically demanding independent water testing for their families at their own expense. Mrs. Patterson mentioned her 8-year-old daughter's persistent, unexplained skin rashes that 3 different dermatologists couldn't diagnose. Mr. Chen suddenly realized his family's chronic digestive problems had started exactly when Victoria began her lake treatment program. People were finally connecting their mysterious health issues to Victoria's chemical warfare against the lake. Victoria's desperate final move was hiring a second consultant, this one claiming specialized expertise in environmental remediation and ecosystem restoration. I researched him immediately and found yet another pool maintenance guy, this time operating out of Gwinnett County with similarly fraudulent credentials. Victoria was pathologically doubling down on fake science because her massive ego couldn't possibly admit she'd poisoned her own neighborhood while trying to improve property values. That evening, I sat alone on my weathered dock, watching the sunset reflect off water that still carried the faint, sickly green tint of Victoria's chemicals. The dead fish had finally stopped floating to the surface, but the ecosystem remained fundamentally broken, possibly for years. What should have been a thriving, spring-fed lake supporting diverse wildlife looked like an abandoned swimming pool filled with stagnant chemical soup. That's when I made my final decision. Victoria needed to understand exactly what she'd done, not just to my property and memories, but to every single family in Riverside Meadows, including her own. The county's comprehensive water quality report arrived on a Tuesday morning that fundamentally changed everything. 62 pages of detailed technical data, geological surveys, and contamination analysis that painted a horrifying picture Victoria never could have imagined in her worst nightmares. Her copper sulfate treatments hadn't just killed fish and destroyed a healthy ecosystem. They'd been systematically poisoning the underground limestone aquifer that supplied drinking water to every single household in Riverside Meadows subdivision for 9 months straight. Every well was contaminated far above federal safety limits. Every family had been drinking toxic water daily, including Victoria's own. I spread the detailed geological survey across my kitchen table and carefully traced the underground spring system with my finger. It looked exactly like an elaborate underground highway network, natural limestone channels carrying water from the lake's spring sources to 53 different wellheads throughout our community. Victoria's decorative pond was actually the primary recharge point for our entire subdivision's water supply system. The timeline was absolutely devastating when I mapped it out. Victoria's first experimental chemical treatment in July perfectly matched when neighbors first started reporting funny-tasting water. Her aggressive September algicide application coincided exactly with the Patterson family's daughter developing unexplained chronic rashes. October's intensive treatment aligned perfectly with a concerning cluster of digestive problems among subdivision children that pediatricians couldn't explain. But the most shocking revelation, the detail that made my hands shake as I read it, involved Victoria's own family health records that I obtained through public health department reports. Her 9-year-old daughter, Sophie, had been hospitalized 3 times for mysterious toxicity symptoms that perfectly matched chronic copper poisoning. Victoria's husband, Robert, had developed concerning memory problems and physical tremors that their family doctor couldn't diagnose or treat. Victoria herself was showing classic textbook symptoms that any medical professional would recognize: green-tinged fingernails, accelerating hair loss, and obvious cognitive impairment during neighborhood conversations. They'd been drinking the most severely contaminated water in the entire subdivision because their expensive well was located closest to the lake's primary underground spring outlet. Victoria had been slowly, methodically poisoning her own children while genuinely believing she was improving property values and neighborhood aesthetics. The technical data was crystal clear to anyone who understood hydrogeology. Copper compounds chemically bind to porous limestone and concentrate exponentially over time. Each successive chemical treatment made the contamination worse, not better. Victoria's 9 months of beautification efforts had transformed our natural water treatment system into an efficient poison delivery network serving 53 households. I called Harold, the original subdivision developer now living in retirement in Florida. "That natural lake system is over 200 years old," Harold explained patiently over the phone. "Those limestone springs naturally filter groundwater through beneficial bacteria colonies that evolved over centuries, kill the bacteria, and you've destroyed the community's primary water source that's been working perfectly since before this country existed." Harold confirmed what the geological survey clearly showed. Riverside Meadows was intentionally built around this specific spring system because it provided clean, reliable water without expensive municipal water connections. The lake wasn't decorative landscaping that could be chemically managed. It was the community's essential life support system. The power dynamics had completely shifted at this point. Victoria wasn't just violating my personal property rights or killing fish out of spite anymore. She was committing serious federal environmental crimes with devastating community-wide health consequences. The Environmental Protection Agency considers groundwater contamination affecting residential drinking water supplies an extremely serious felony, especially when it directly impacts children's health. But here's what made Victoria's situation truly tragic from a human perspective. She genuinely didn't know what she was doing. In her mind, shaped by years of real estate development, she'd been professionally cleaning a decorative pond to improve neighborhood aesthetics and increase property values. She had absolutely no idea that her algae control chemicals were flowing directly into her daughter's drinking water, her husband's morning coffee, her own daily shower. The emotional weight of this realization hit me incredibly hard. This wasn't just about legal vindication or defending property rights anymore. Victoria had unknowingly tortured her own family for 9 months while trying to stop me from fishing and preserving Margaret's memory. Her daughter's hospital visits, her husband's declining health, her own mysterious medical symptoms, all self-inflicted through environmental ignorance and arrogant refusal to consult actual experts. I had comprehensive evidence of Federal Clean Water Act violations, criminal endangerment of public health, and systematic contamination of community drinking water affecting hundreds of people. Victoria's continued chemical treatments, even after multiple warnings, made her criminally liable for everything that followed. She was potentially facing federal prison time for environmental crimes she didn't even realize she was committing. The question wasn't whether to pursue Sandra legally. The EPA would automatically handle that once they reviewed this geological data. The real question was whether to proactively save her family by immediately stopping her next planned treatment, or let justice take its inevitable natural course through the legal system. Victoria had another comprehensive lake treatment scheduled for the week before our community's big summer pool party. Time was rapidly running out. My water treatment background taught me that successfully stopping environmental crimes requires overwhelming documented evidence and perfect timing for maximum impact. Victoria needed to understand the full scope of her devastation in the most public, undeniable way possible, and I had exactly the right tools to make that understanding happen. First came the physical preparation. I installed hidden professional-grade water flow monitoring equipment at 4 underground outlet points where the lake springs connected to the subdivision's well system. These weren't amateur devices bought online. I used the same professional sensors we'd used at the municipal treatment plant, equipment that could track contamination in real time and project the data onto large displays for public viewing. The monitoring system worked elegantly. Sensors detected copper levels in water flowing from lake springs into underground limestone channels. Digital displays showed contamination flowing underground in bright red streams with real-time readings of toxicity levels that anyone could understand. People could literally watch poison traveling from Victoria's decorative pond directly into their kitchen faucets in real time. For maximum visual impact during the confrontation, I built a portable demonstration using clear plexiglass tubes and colored water to show how underground springs physically connect multiple wellheads across the subdivision. The geology was actually quite simple once you could see it properly mapped out, like a hidden plumbing system where one contamination source systematically affected 53 different outlets. Legal strategy came next. I filed a formal detailed EPA complaint documenting 9 months of violations, unauthorized chemical discharge into protected water sources, contamination of drinking water supplies, and criminal endangerment of public health, including children. The EPA takes groundwater contamination extremely seriously, especially when children's health is involved. Federal environmental crimes carry mandatory minimum sentences that state courts legally cannot reduce. I contacted environmental attorney Jessica Walsh, who specialized in Clean Water Act enforcement. Jessica carefully reviewed my evidence and water quality reports, then delivered sobering news about Victoria's legal exposure. She's facing potential federal prison time, unlimited financial liability for cleanup costs, and lifetime monitoring requirements for every affected family, Jessica explained. This is as serious as environmental crimes get. Victoria's final comprehensive lake beautification treatment was scheduled for 6 a.m. Thursday morning, exactly 48 hours before the community's annual summer pool party. She'd purchased industrial-grade copper compounds from an agricultural supply store, enough toxic chemicals to treat a 100-acre commercial lake. For our relatively small spring-fed pond, it would be environmental overkill of absolutely epic proportions. Her timing couldn't have been more tone-deaf if she'd deliberately tried. Families were excitedly preparing for the biggest social event of the year. Children making colorful posters for swimming competitions, parents planning elaborate potluck dishes, teenagers organizing volleyball tournaments and music playlists. Victoria was planning to dump massive quantities of toxic chemicals into their water supply right before everyone gathered to celebrate community and family. I discreetly filmed Victoria loading 50-pound chemical bags into her white BMW at the farm supply store, chatting cheerfully with the clerk about pond maintenance and property management. She even posted multiple Instagram stories about her beautification project's final phase, using hashtags like "San neighborhood goals" and "Gasa property values" and "Tasam community leadership." The disconnect between her confident social media presence and the environmental reality was genuinely staggering to witness. But Victoria's own health was deteriorating rapidly from the contamination she'd created. The copper poisoning symptoms that she'd been dismissing as stress were becoming impossible to ignore or hide. Her fingernails had developed a distinct green tinge that expensive manicures couldn't mask. Hair loss was becoming visible despite twice-weekly salon treatments. Memory problems were affecting her speech during neighborhood conversations, making her repeat herself. Most heartbreaking was watching Sophie's condition worsen dramatically. Victoria's 9-year-old daughter had been hospitalized twice in the past month alone for mysterious toxicity symptoms that perfectly matched chronic copper exposure. The pediatric toxicologist had explicitly recommended immediate environmental water testing, but Victoria angrily dismissed the medical advice as overreaction to normal childhood illnesses. Robert, Victoria's husband, finally confronted her directly about their family's declining health. I overheard their heated argument from my backyard while watering plants. Robert was shouting about Sophie's mounting medical bills, while Victoria insisted their problems stemmed from negative energy and stress from dealing with Dale's constant harassment. The mini twist came when I discovered that Robert had been secretly researching copper sulfate toxicity online late at night. He'd found multiple EPA warnings about groundwater contamination and health risks, But when Robert tried to discuss environmental concerns with Victoria, she accused him of betraying his own family by siding with Dale against her community leadership. My documentation efforts intensified dramatically. I filmed Victoria's chemical purchases with telephoto lenses. I recorded her dismissive responses to health concerns. I tracked her family's medical appointments through careful observation and public records. Every piece of evidence would help EPA investigators understand the clear pattern of environmental crimes and family endangerment that had developed over 9 months. County Health Department monitoring confirmed the contamination was spreading well beyond Riverside Meadows' subdivision boundaries. Wells in neighboring Meadowbrook estates were showing elevated copper levels, proving Victoria's chemicals were migrating through extensive underground limestone channel networks. What started as lake poisoning was rapidly becoming regional groundwater contamination. Dr. Kim's comprehensive pediatric data revealed 27 children across 2 subdivisions showing copper poisoning symptoms. The contamination timeline matched Victoria's treatment schedule with frightening precision. July chemicals coincided with digestive problems. August treatments aligned with skin rashes. September's intensive cleaning triggered neurological symptoms in several kids. EPA investigators arrived Wednesday evening, quietly positioning themselves with federal arrest warrants and emergency water testing equipment. Agent Rodriguez explained they'd been monitoring our situation since my initial detailed complaint, carefully waiting for sufficient evidence to justify federal intervention. The bureaucratic process fascinated me. Environmental crimes require overwhelming documentation because cleanup costs can reach millions of dollars. EPA investigators needed proof of intentional, ongoing contamination, not just accidental one-time spillage. Victoria's 9 months of systematic chemical treatments provided perfect evidence of willful environmental destruction. Thursday morning brought Victoria's final chemical assault on the lake ecosystem. I watched from my kitchen window as she confidently dumped 50 pounds of copper compounds into water that was already dangerously toxic. The lake turned bright fluorescent green within minutes, so visibly contaminated that even Victoria seemed momentarily surprised by the intense color, but she pressed forward with her fountain installation plans anyway. She'd hired contractors to begin drainage and excavation immediately after the chemical treatment settled. Her vision of a decorative water feature had become an environmental disaster that she was absolutely determined to complete, regardless of obvious toxicity. The cruel irony was watching Victoria enthusiastically prepare for the pool party while actively poisoning the water source. She baked elaborate cupcakes for the community celebration while her chemicals flowed into every family's drinking water. The cognitive dissonance was almost supernatural, celebrating community while systematically destroying community health. That evening, Victoria posted final Instagram updates about her successful lake renovation and exciting community improvements. Photos showed her bright green toxic pond with cheerful captions about enhanced property values and professional management. She tagged local real estate agents and invited potential buyers to see the professionally managed amenities. Less than 12 hours later, Victoria would learn exactly what her professional management had accomplished for the community she claimed to serve. Sandra's final power play arrived Friday morning via certified mail, a restraining order claiming I was harassing community leadership and endangering public health through reckless fishing activities. The legal papers accused me of everything from trespassing to environmental terrorism, wrapped in 6 pages of official court language that made Victoria sound like an innocent victim of my aggression. The restraining order was Victoria's nuclear option, designed to keep me away from Thursday night's mandatory HOA meeting, where she planned to triumphantly announce her comprehensive lake renovation victory. If I couldn't attend the meeting, I couldn't present damning evidence of her environmental crimes to the community. But Victoria's sworn affidavit contained multiple false statements that would destroy her credibility in court. She claimed legal ownership of the lake, explicitly denied any chemical treatments, and accused me of contaminating water through unsanitary fishing practices. Every sentence was either an outright lie or demonstrated fundamental misunderstanding of property law. The judge granted only a temporary restraining order, but scheduled an immediate hearing after reviewing my extensive property documentation. Victoria's legal strategy had backfired spectacularly. Instead of silencing me, she'd given me a formal court platform to present evidence of her environmental crimes, with federal EPA investigators as official witnesses. Thursday night arrived. 200 residents packed the community center beyond legal capacity. Parents brought children with mysterious rashes and digestive problems, elderly couples dealing with unexplained tremors. Everyone had health concerns they couldn't explain, but nobody had connected their problems to Victoria's lake treatments yet. I activated my water flow monitoring display as Victoria confidently called the meeting to order. The large screen behind her began showing real-time contamination flowing underground, bright red streams of poison traveling from the lake directly into every household's well system. The visual impact was absolutely devastating. Color-coded displays revealed copper toxicity 43 times above safe drinking water limits, flowing in real time from Victoria's decorative pond to 53 different homes. Numbers climbed steadily as fresh contamination from her morning chemical treatment reached the underground spring outlets. County Health Inspector Maria stood up first, interrupting Victoria's presentation. "Mrs. Hammond, your lake treatments have contaminated every well in the subdivision. Children have been drinking poison for 9 months because of your unsupervised chemical applications." Victoria's response was predictably defensive. "That's absolutely ridiculous. The lake is decorative landscaping. Our water comes from city sources." That's when Dr. Kim presented her medical evidence. 27 children showing classic copper poisoning symptoms, hospitalization records, blood test results, treatment timelines that perfectly matched Victoria's chemical applications. Sophie Hammond had the highest toxicity levels because their well was closest to the primary spring outlet. The crowd erupted as parents realized their children's mysterious illnesses were caused by their HOA president's beautification project. EPA agent Rodriguez stepped forward with federal arrest warrants. "Victoria Hammond, you're under arrest for environmental crimes including contamination of drinking water supplies and endangerment of public health." But the real devastation came when Victoria's phone rang. Sophie's pediatrician calling with definitive blood work results. Severe copper toxicity requiring immediate medical intervention and environmental remediation. Victoria answered while EPA agents waited. "Mrs. Hammond, your daughter has been systematically poisoned by heavy metal contamination in your drinking water. We need to identify the source immediately to prevent permanent neurological damage." Victoria's face went white as realization hit. The display screen showed contamination flowing directly from the lake to her house in real time. Her morning's chemical treatment was literally flowing into Sophie's drinking water as we watched. I didn't know," Victoria whispered, staring at the monitoring display. "I thought it was just decorative." That's when I delivered the final blow. "Victoria, the lake you tried to beautify was designed by nature 200 years ago as our water treatment plant. You turned our life source into a poison delivery system, and you drank it yourself." Victoria collapsed as EPA agents read her Miranda rights. The chemical container fell from her hands, spilling copper sulfate across the floor. Local news cameras captured everything, parents demanding immediate medical testing, EPA investigators seizing evidence, Dr. Kim announcing emergency protocols. Victoria received the harshest penalties federal court could impose: 18 months. Federal prison, $75,000 in EPA fines, $490,000 restitution for emergency well replacement, and comprehensive medical monitoring for every affected family. Her homeowner's insurance covered initial cleanup costs, but her personal assets were completely liquidated to fund ongoing health screening for the 27 children she'd unknowingly poisoned through environmental ignorance. The criminal prosecution moved with shocking speed once EPA investigators presented their overwhelming evidence. Victoria's 9 months of systematic environmental destruction, documented through her own social media posts and chemical purchase receipts, provided undeniable proof of federal Clean Water Act violations. Her sworn affidavit falsely claiming lake ownership only strengthened the prosecution's case by proving willful disregard for property law and environmental regulations. Robert Hammond filed for emergency divorce and full custody of Sophie, citing Victoria's criminal endangerment of their daughter's health through environmental negligence. Sophie's copper toxicity required 8 months of intensive medical treatment, but doctors projected full recovery with no permanent neurological damage. The family relocated to Robert's parents' home in North Carolina, far from the subdivision Victoria had inadvertently transformed into a temporary toxic waste site. Community recovery began immediately with emergency well replacement using Victoria's insurance settlement and liquidated personal assets. All 53 households received brand new wells with proper filtration systems and monthly water quality monitoring programs. The subdivision's property values actually increased significantly once news coverage highlighted the comprehensive environmental remediation and dramatically upgraded water infrastructure throughout the community. My lake restoration took 22 months of careful biological rehabilitation. County environmental specialists methodically reintroduced beneficial bacteria colonies and native fish populations while continuously monitoring water chemistry throughout the entire healing process. The ecosystem gradually returned to its pristine original condition, eventually supporting even healthier wildlife diversity than before Victoria's devastating chemical warfare. The HOA underwent complete restructuring with new bylaws requiring mandatory environmental impact assessments for any water feature modifications. Victoria's Lake Beautification Committee was permanently dissolved and replaced by an Environmental Stewardship Council that includes certified water quality professionals and emphasizes ecosystem protection over aesthetic improvements. Legal precedent from Victoria's federal case strengthened environmental protection laws throughout the entire state. Her prosecution became a cautionary tale used in EPA training materials nationwide for identifying and prosecuting groundwater contamination crimes. Environmental law schools now study Hammond versus EPA as a textbook example of how homeowner association overreach can trigger serious federal criminal liability. I received unanimous HOA approval for permanent exclusive fishing rights, plus $42,000 in damages for 9 months of property interference and severe emotional distress, but more importantly, I was officially named the subdivision's first environmental guardian with legal authority to monitor water quality and prevent future contamination incidents. The personal healing meant far more than financial compensation ever could. My morning fishing ritual returned with deeper appreciation for the lake's critical role in community health. Margaret's memory was honored not just through our private moments at sunrise, but through actively protecting the water source that sustained 200 neighbors. I established the Margaret Hutchinson Clean Water Memorial Fund at the local high school, providing college scholarships for students pursuing environmental science careers. The fund raises money through annual Clean Water Day festivals that bring families together for fishing tournaments, water quality education workshops, and ecological awareness activities that teach children about protecting natural resources. 27 children receive full medical monitoring through their 18th birthdays, completely funded by Victoria's restitution payments. Dr. Kim reports that early intervention prevented any long-term health consequences, and most families now actively advocate for stronger environmental protection in residential communities nationwide. The lake has become a recognized model for sustainable subdivision water management, attracting environmental science students from 4 local universities for field research projects and ecological studies. My monitoring system was donated to the high school's environmental science program, where students learn hands-on about aquifer protection and water quality testing procedures. Victoria's million-dollar mansion remained unsold for 3 years before being purchased by a young family who specifically wanted to live in a community with outstanding environmental stewardship reputation. The new owners removed all of Victoria's decorative landscaping and replaced it with native plants that actively support healthy lake ecology. Community bonds strengthened dramatically through shared recovery from Victoria's environmental assault. Neighbors who barely spoke before now organize regular water quality testing parties and environmental education events for children. The kids who suffered copper poisoning have become passionate young advocates for protecting natural water resources in their schools and communities. This morning I cast my line at sunrise, watching crystal clear water reflect clouds that Margaret would have absolutely loved. Healthy fish jump in the early morning light, children play safely on the restored shoreline, and families drink clean water from wells that will never again be threatened by ignorant beautification projects. The lake is alive again, the community is stronger, and Victoria learned the hardest possible lesson about respecting nature's systems. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting someone poison themselves while you document everything. Justice served cold, clean, and pure as spring water. If you enjoyed this story of HOA karma and environmental justice, drop a comment below with your worst HOA nightmare. We might feature your story next. And smash that subscribe button if you love watching entitled Presidents Face Federal Consequences for Their Actions. Thanks for watching, and remember, always know where your drinking water actually comes from before you start dumping chemicals into decorative ponds. Until next time, stay safe and stay informed.